When most people think of handlers, they think of something straight out of MK Ultra or Monarch programming literature. But I'm finding that more and more people feel like they've had a handler in their lives. So if you don't know what a handler is someone who is designed to keep you in a lower vibrational state of consciousness. For example, it might be a boss or mentor who wants to keep you at a certain job that feels soul-sucking and like something that you don't want to do. It could be a parent that you live with that has financial control over you. It could be a romantic partner who's very toxic to you, but then they turn around and they treat you with the most kindness and love that you've ever experienced. So it keeps you stuck in those toxic cycles. So it can look different for a lot of people. And I just made a video the other day about handlers being the archons of the matrix, if we are going off the basis that reality is a hologram. And I'm using the gateway tapes as a reference point. The CIA came out with an article in the 1980s called the Assessment of the Gateway Tapes. And in that article, they admit that reality is a hologram. So that's what the gateway tapes did. They studied consciousness outside the realm of time and space, and they put us, or the user, in altered states of consciousness. They can be used for inducing lucid dreaming or out-of-body states, but also for hypnosis. And many people who were in the GATE program or who had childhood hearing tests in the 80s and 90s and long before that, but I think the 80s and 90s is really when they were using this stuff. But they've been studying, I believe they were studying the gateway tapes in the 50s and 60s and coming up with the technology then. So even if you were in GATE or gifted and talented and had hearing tests before them, then you might remember the gateway tapes too. But there's a lot of speculation that the gateway tapes could have been used to keep us in an altered state of consciousness and to test to see who could be easily hypnotized. So all of that to say, the video I made the other day was about general mind control and programming, and how at this point in time on the planet, because we are a society that is so on the grid, so we've got our medical system, we have the education system, we have Hollywood, television programming, the internet, the algorithms, the military, politics. All of these organizations are essentially, I'm going to use the word brainwashing. So I mean that in a sense that if you work for any of these organizations, you are given a certain script to follow, and they won't hire you or work with you if you don't follow that script. Hence why handlers might be necessary, especially for those of us who consider ourselves free thinkers and those of us who might start questioning some of these systems. For example, the medical system. What happened during the pandemic? How a lot of people did not like that they were forced to get a certain thing. And a lot of people on the planet are waking up and saying, okay, is our medical system just about keeping money in their pockets? Because when they're putting our health at risk, we the people, and profiting off of our illnesses, then raises some questions. But if you were to say that to the organization that you worked with, you would very likely lose your job or get canceled on the internet or get your accounts deleted. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there's a certain script that we have to follow as citizens in this country or in the world, or however you want to look at it. So that is why we would have a need for handlers. So in previous videos, I hadn't quite thought of it in the way that I'm thinking of it now. I was mostly talking about handlers from an MK Ultra or Monarch programming standpoint. So that kind of handler is someone who, so basically if you're a targeted individual or if you have signs of being a victim of this type of programming, so and again, take this with a grain of salt. This is not me saying you absolutely have a handler and you absolutely are a victim of Monarch. These are just some signs that I notice that a lot of gate kids have in common with Monarch victims. So, as I said, early childhood programs that tested for giftedness or intelligence or picked you to be in some kind of group or an expert or something. So whether you're music prodigy or gymnastics or a show, John Benet Ramsey kind of person, or if you were in the gifted and talented program, if you had family in the military, secret societies or religious organizations. So religious programming is a big one. But if you were chosen from a young age, you were indoctrined at a young age. And if you had an IQ of 130 or higher, you were more of a target for these types of mind programs. And early premature births, early childhood trauma, especially before the age or around 18 months, born with umbilical cords around your neck, having to go through C-sections, which can be traumatic for both mother and baby, which is kind of crazy because that's pretty much what they want you to do at the hospital these days. Not only so they can take the placenta and make some money off of your placenta, because you're not allowed to take it home, apparently, allegedly, or not to mention you gotta pay back all those medical bills, because I'm pretty sure that's an expensive procedure. So we're, as a society, dependent on a lot of these programs. A lot of people with health issues, absolutely dependent on certain medications and doctor's visits and testing and all that. So it can be hard to escape these programs in our society. And it's these very programs that are keeping a lot of people in lower states of consciousness and making us vibrational matches for these handler type experiences. But I have good news, because if you have been able to see through the programming of these so-called handlers in your life, then that means you're awake. That means you can do something about it. Whether or not you choose to do something about it is a different question. So, as I said in my last video, everyone could be acting as a handler for somebody else, depending on the state of consciousness that we are in at that time. I myself have probably acted as a handler for people when I was in lower states of consciousness and when I was acting out relationship programming. For example, being the girlfriend of an addict and trying to make them choose me instead of their substance of choice. Staying with people that I knew, that I couldn't admit to myself were wrong for me. We weren't happy, but I was so invested in the relationship, I didn't want to give up on it. That's another type of programming. I've been codependent with parents before, and even in some friendships. For example, when you're in the type of a relationship where that person makes the money and maybe they pay for where you live, but when you live with them, you're under their rules and their scrutiny, and it feels very disempowering because they might be kind of emotionally abusive. But the common denominator in all of those experiences for me was that I made choices in every one of those situations to move myself out of them, even if for a certain period of time I was stuck in them and felt powerless. And I think this is a really good topic to talk about right now because it is Scorpio season at the time I'm making this video. And Scorpio in astrology is the underworld. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about today is how handlers can be a spiritual activation. And this is inspired to a few comments I've received on some of my videos. A lot of people in my comment section, when they share their stories, a lot of us seem to be in a kind of like a disempowered state about handlers. Like, my mom's a handler, my boyfriend's a handler, my partner's a handler. I've had so many handlers, but I don't hear a ton of people talking about solutions or talking about it from an empowered standpoint. So whenever I get comments that are about how handlers can be spiritual catalysts or activation points, I get really excited because I like to talk about the solution more than I like to talk about the problem. I just talk about the problem a lot in my video to paint a picture so we understand the full big picture of the problem so we can apply the proper solution. Because oftentimes, if you don't understand the problem, you don't have awareness of why things are happening, it can be hard to find a solution, let alone find the motivations to implement a solution. So back to the statement that handlers can be a spiritual catalyst. As I was saying, anyone can act as a handler because the nation is under mind control. So a lot of us, especially if we work for any of the organizations that I have had previously mentioned, so military, education system, medical system, intelligence agencies, police, politics, Hollywood, media, especially if you have a higher up position, then you're more likely to be a target because, as I said, they won't let you have these positions of power and influence if you're not going to follow the script that they made for you. So a lot of you could have handlers in your life right now, and there may be some kind of mental struggle that you experience, especially if you're starting to wake up to a lot of these systems. And maybe, especially like in Hollywood and stuff, if you work in the industry and you see abuse on set, or you see these people, how they invoke demonic entities through rituals and stuff, and how they have a lot of really degrading, bad actions towards vulnerable people on the set. And then a lot of these people, when they speak out, they are canceled for it. And just their lives can be ruined by it. So they either will lose their career that they've worked their whole lives for. So some, I imagine, don't want to lose that because they've invested their whole lives in it. So they just sit and they accept the abuse. While others who are brave enough to stand up and speak out may lose everything and probably will lose everything. I know for me, when I was in a similar, not legit, complete Hollywood, I wasn't in a Hollywood movie or anything like that, but feel like I was on the pre-selection phase for that. I was working with somebody who was like, we're gonna be famous. And I noticed that everything to get me famous, I thought it was operating from like a law of attraction standpoint. And I was thinking to myself like, oh my gosh, like my intentions are going to manifest. But what I didn't realize is that I was working with somebody who made these intentions manifest by doing occult magic and some shady things that took me a couple months to really see what was going on and understanding what I was signing up for simply by associating with this person. So at one point, finally, about a year ago or so, I cut ties completely. I blocked everybody. I turned down any script that anybody offered me, any comedy show or opportunities to produce shows or do creative projects with anyone who I met through those people and anyone who gave me a bad feeling in my gut. So that is how I got out of that situation. And you betcha, I lost everything that I was working towards. I didn't get to be a celebrity guest judge at comedy shows or local shows in my local comedy scene. I missed out on a lot of comedy shows because I wasn't willing to put up with abuse from the producers. And then of course, acting and all that stuff, I didn't end up doing any of those scripts because all the movies were horror scripts and they were about substance abuse and addiction and negative vibrational things. So what we have to understand, if you're acting as if, so you're acting out a script or movie, that is how things manifest. So the craziest thing ever, I've talked about this in other videos, like I was doing an improv comedy show podcast about exposing the Illuminati before I had ever met anyone who I even thought that they could actually be the Illuminati, or before I thought that that was even real. At that point in my life, it was just a concept and an idea, something that I might have been vaguely interested in. And then when I started acting it out in my podcast, I started manifesting real life experiences where these people were like drawn to me and showed up in my experience. So that made me a believer, like, yikes, law of attraction, am I attracting this? And then that takes me back to the holographic experience of reality, where I think it was Michael Talbot, I want to say, Michael something. Oh, it's so pretty over here. Michael Talbot, or I think that's his last name, wrote the holographic universe. I think that came out in the 80s or 90s. But, sorry, I thought I just heard an animal. That book came out in the 80s or the 90s. And basically he was saying that reality all kind of exists like almost like on a film strip, but you can see a piece of the holograph in every script, no matter what way you cut it. So in other words, all of reality exists at any given moment. So we activate it through our consciousness, which is light codes. And that's why I'm super passionate about teaching human design, because human design code is about neutrinos that are being emitted from the stars and the sun. So sun represents consciousness and astrology and human design. And as the planets are transiting and moving, they're emitting light codes and light frequencies. So they're information particles that we absorb through our DNA. So all of that to say, I believe that we have access to whatever experiences we want to create while we're here. But most of the time, I would dare to say that the majority of people are probably creating on autopilot. So they're allowing the handlers in their lives, who are also under mind control, by the way, to write the scripts for them. And I was looking up IQ today because somebody made a comment on my channel how they feel kind of alone. They don't understand how most people just don't see the world in the way that they do. And I totally relate to that, because I'm often like, how do you guys not see this? And I looked up IQ today. How common is it to have an ID of 130 or higher? How common is it to have an IQ of 130 or higher? And friggin' 2 to 2.5% of people have an IQ that high. So that means most of the population is copying. So they're doing what they're told. So if you're in that top 2%, then you are probably a target for these handlers. But it is your responsibility. It is our responsibility. I just saw a butterfly. It's our responsibility to wake up to it. So going back to this idea that handlers give us the opportunity to have a spiritual awakening. I think that's the most empowering way to look at the idea of a handler and the experience of having a handler. But when we come across these situations in our life, we are presented with a choice. It's an opportunity for us to do something different. So it's not always going to be easy to break out of mind control. But as they say, new levels, new devils. So basically, every time you're about to make a quantum leap or shift into a new phase of consciousness, so like let's say you're in a relationship with somebody. Maybe at the time you were in that relationship, they were everything you wanted. You had the honeymoon phase. Things were going good. But throughout that relationship, you learned something about yourself. You realize, well, maybe I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and I don't want to get married and have kids like I thought I did. Maybe I discovered an interest for podcasting or creating or designing or starting my own business, and I really want to do that, but my partner really wants to have kids and he really wants me to be a stay-at-home mom, and I feel stuck, but because I love my partner and I want to make them happy and stay with them, but I also want to honor myself and what I need. So that's a great example of what a handler type relationship can feel like. And I'm not saying that that person who is the handler is a conscious handler. As I keep saying, all of us are under some form of mind control, in one way or another, to varying degrees, because some of us see through it more than others. Another example of this might be a parent or someone that you live with who pays all the bills and they're very abusive. So maybe right before you're about to shift, like you're about to you've awakened to this fact somehow, like, oh, okay, I see. If I live under their roof, yeah, they're paying for everything and it's nice and it's comforting. But if I want to be empowered and I want to have freedom to live my life the way I want, then I'm going to have to cut ties with this person. So that can be a hard thing to do as well. So I understand why a lot of us stay in these certain situations, especially work handler type situations, because when it comes to handlers in the workplace, that's your livelihood. If you don't have a job, how are you going to pay your bills? And that's a really hard one for a lot of people. So I've been through that too. I used to work at a soul-sucking marketing job a handful of years ago. And I really, really wanted to have my own business and be on my own schedule. I didn't even know what I wanted to do back then. I just knew I wanted to work for myself. And it was right at the time when I was waking up to all of these things. Maybe not so much mind control, but I guess so, mind control, but I didn't call it that back then. It was more so I was having a spiritual awakening, and I was starting to have an interest in crystals and astrology and meditation and star seeds. And that is why my business was birthed, by the way. So the reason I talk about my business at the end of every episode, I don't want you guys to feel like I'm always trying to sell you something, but I also want people to understand it is how I make a living. And I also have 20 plus years experience in studying astrology and teaching it. And also human design and tarot and remote viewing are all skills that I've developed that took me time, money, energy to learn how to do this. So the other thing, not that I owe an explanation to anyone, but even though my channel is not that big, I have 200 something people who are on my page. So if everybody feels seen by my content, even if like 1% of you write me a really long letter, that's still a lot of DMs to go through. And I also have paid clients. I have rescue animals I take care of, and a life. I need time to relax and detach from the internet sometimes too. So that is why I charge for mentorship services. And as much as I'd like to answer every question I get, like I really want to, I love doing this stuff. I love helping people, but based on time, like the more visibility you get as a creator, you don't have time to be there for everyone. So the value you get from me, or that you feel you might get from me, the value is reciprocated by the monetary value that I receive in return for that value of information. So I can keep making videos like this, and I can keep doing this and keep getting the information out there. So thanks for understanding that. So anyways, as I was saying about the spiritual awakening, those are just some examples of handler situations that I myself have walked out of. So I want to encourage anyone who's listening to this video, if any of those scenarios sound familiar for you, I just want to tell you that the fact that you've awakened to the fact that these people might be handlers and they may be controlling your narrative or your decisions in some way, bravo, that is step one. That's the first step of being an empowered individual, because now you have an opportunity for how you're going to respond. And I know when money's involved, and even when love is involved, it can be really hard to walk away from these people. But every time I have walked away, it's like I jump off the cliff not knowing what is going to catch me, but something always does. So it's like having faith, like the Fool card in tarot, standing at the edge of the mountain and just blindly jumping, knowing that because you're doing the right thing that's in alignment with your soul, something is going to catch you and you're going to be led where you need to go. One of the most important things also to understand is that, since, according to the CIA and the Gateway tapes, we're living in a holographic universe, that means that most of our reality or potentiality for what manifests is simply that. It's a potentiality, and it exists only in the quantum field, the infinite quantum field. So those codes don't start activating until we view them. So that's why we stay stuck in these handler type situations, because we are running those codes by either noticing that they're a handler, affirming they are a handler, affirming I am a victim, affirming I am a targeted individual, versus understanding that we are a part of those programs when we affirm those things. So we have to be the enlightened beings here and say, I'm going to make a new choice. So no longer, no longer am I going to be a targeted individual, as much as they may want me still, right? But no longer am I going to be engaged in these handler type relationships. So if that means moving in my car for a couple months, which I've done for 3 months, I traveled in my car and camped at free campsites or slept at a friend's house or family's house or stayed and camped in my car, I had a friggin' blast. And my mom thought I was crazy, but at that point in time, I needed to individuate myself as a young adult and know that I could take care of myself by my own. So if I want to move back my mom in the future, which I did after that, like I knew it was by choice because I wanted to, because I loved my mom and I was happier doing that. But I know that if I need to take care of myself, I can. So it's important to know that you have a choice in this situation versus just blindly going along with something and not feeling like you have a choice. So in my case, like it was scary kind of because like I'm camping at a campground. Like I don't know what strangers are going to be there. I don't know how to put air in my tire or change a tire or anything like that. My car was leaking oil at one point, but I learned how to do all that stuff, and then it made me feel even more empowered. So I grew so much as an individual and a person when I did that. Another example is I was in a really abusive relationship right before I left for that trip, and we played music together, and at that point in my life, I really wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be Lady Gaga, A Star Is Born. I literally thought that movie was made for me because I thought that was how my life was going to happen, or at least how I wanted to. I wanted to like tour and play music with somebody that I was also in love with, and I found someone like that, but he didn't want to tour. He didn't want to play music together. He was literally one of the most narcissistic people I've ever met in my life. Like we would play music together, and he's like, well, there's nothing wrong with this. So actually, let me take that back. Maybe in the way he was doing it was really narcissistic, but he didn't like when he didn't have all eyes on him. Like if we got attention together, he would get mad and pick a fight about it because he didn't get that attention by himself. He only got that attention when we were performing as an act together. So that's what I mean by he's narcissistic. If you want to be a solo musician, nothing wrong with that. But the point I was making was if he didn't generate it, like he got mad and resentful that people were interested in him all of a sudden because we had a cute little act that we were doing. Why wouldn't people be interested in that? Anyways, the relationship was very codependent. We both struggled with codependency, not only with each other, but with our parents. We both had addiction issues in the past. So it was like, he was a mirror for me. And I knew in my heart a long time, and he probably did too, that we should not be together. But we were, it was during the pandemic, and a lot of people were kind of staying in domestic situations at that time because the alternative is like being alone. And I was much younger back then. This was a little while ago. Well, only 5 years ago, but whatever. So anyways, eventually, because the desire in my heart was to break free from the programming or the control of the relationship, and it was to, like, I wanted to feel like I could wear makeup without somebody bitching at me. I wanted to feel like I could have guy friends or girlfriends without somebody getting mad about who I was talking to. I just wanted to be a free individual. So even though I didn't know how that was going to happen and I didn't have the balls to walk away myself, the universe heard my cry and it manifested as him attacking me one day and me literally thinking I was going to lose my life. But rather than being a victim, which I did feel like for a couple months after that, and I could not stop it from replaying in my head, it was very traumatic for me, but I didn't continue to call myself that after I initially grieved. I looked at it as an opportunity, like I couldn't make this move or this jump by myself, so the universe conspired to make that happen. And did I almost, get really injured and have a scary experience? Yes, I almost did, but that's the point. I almost did. And when I had this other handler experience with the Hollywood show business people more recently, I had some terrifying experiences. Somebody took me on they literally kidnapped me in their car and took me on what somebody referred to as a death ride. So literally like they were going to crash into the wall and they were not even human in that moment. Like I felt like a demon was taking over that person's movements and actions. Like he wasn't even a real person in that moment. And he was the one who was in the satanic rock band and who was doing rituals and stuff. So I think that he was literally selling his soul, and I almost paid the price for it because I almost DIED in that moment, but I didn't. So that leads me to believe there's so many close calls in my life. And I know that if you're a gate kid, you've also had so many close calls too. So that should tell you you're special and you're protected. You're protected by guardian angels, spirits, whatever, your higher self. I don't know, but maybe let's just explore the possibility that there's a part of us that manifests these situations into our experience so we can become aware of our power. Because I will tell you straight up, I did not know I had this kind of power to be free, authentic, strong, confident, to cut my hair in a friggin' mullet that looks heinous half the time. But you have to have confidence to rock this kind of hair. And I feel free from it. And I feel so thankful at the end of the day for those experiences, because before those experiences, I was under mind control comfortably, right? It wasn't bad enough for me to make any big moves until it was. And when it was bad enough, I either took the leap myself and I decided I was going to go, or the universe, certain planets like Uranus. The day that my ex attacked me was during the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So Jupiter's expansion, Saturn is responsibility and reality. So those planets conjoining in the sky is kind of like Saturn. This is the reality of your situation. This guy is not mentally stable and he's bringing you down. You have to leave. He's done close calls like that in the past and you didn't leave. So Saturn is like, boom, biatch, time to go. And Jupiter is there to support my expansion and my growth. So that's why I'm so passionate about astrology, and I'm going to flex my offerings again, because I believe in what I have to offer. And I believe that astrology reading, where we go over your transits and progressions, will change your life and it will help you out immensely. The reason I teach this stuff is because I was my own dummy that I was practicing on. I use all of these things still in my own life to this day. And whenever I'm going through a big shift or transition, I'm always like, what's going on with the planets? Let's see where my progressed sun has shifted. Where's my progressed Mercury? What's transiting my 8th house? Do I have any 12th house transits? All of that stuff has helped me view my life in a practical way, because I do believe on some level that we live in a kind of hologram. Now, whether or not reality itself is a hologram and we have like a physical 3D Earth, but we have these AI programs like that DARPA is using, or elite shadow governments like have technology that we don't even know about. That was kind of discussed in my video yesterday about handlers and archons. So it's possible that we have this kind of technology, and that the matrix, what we call the matrix, is literally a frequency or technology grid. So it's like certain music, certain movies, certain substances, certain relationships keep us in a certain state of frequency. So this is all mind controlled, designed to keep us in lower states of consciousness. So when we're existing in those lower states of consciousness, we are part of that frequency grid. So we're going to be unknowingly shoved into playing those roles, the roles of the toxic girlfriend or the toxic boyfriend, the role of the employee who hates their soul-sucking job, the role of the codependent child. But if you can awaken to what is going on and you trust in the universe by making those empowered choices that might be hard to make, we have to have faith. It's the faith that guides us into jumping off the cliff, not knowing what's going to catch us, or not knowing that the program is writing itself. We don't know what the program is going to look like, but we have faith that it's going to manifest. So it's kind of like in law of attraction and manifestation. You act as if. I'll never forget a time in my 20s where I was working at a restaurant, and I was 27, and I was so tired of just being the girl that worked at a restaurant, and I wanted to be a graphic designer too. So I started telling people, even though I didn't have clients yet, I think I had one client, my cousin, but I wanted to have more clients. So rather than introducing myself as, hi, I'm Alex, I work at Toby Keith's restaurant, I would say, hi, I'm Alex. I serve on the side, but I'm a freelance graphic designer. I do flyers, I do business cards, I do logos, I do websites. So that was what I presented myself as, and I supplement my income with a serving job, versus I have the serving job and I'd be lucky to get a graphic design job on the side. So again, we have to be the ones who act as if. So if you want to be a confident, empowered individual, you have to act the part. So whether that's thinking about, what does the empowered version of me look like? What would the empowered version of me do in this situation? What is my future self doing that this person who has a handler can't do right now because they're disempowered by this handler? So anyways, I hope this has been helpful and that you've learned at least some ways to shift these handler type experiences into being a huge spiritual awakening and catalyst for you, because ultimately, like I said, it's a gift to be able to wake up to this mind control, and that means that they're not in control. If you know what they're doing, they are not in control. So you can walk away, and it might be hard temporarily, but every success story out there, every person who became a millionaire, at least that I've seen, all these people had a point of struggle. So think of this as the beginning of your struggle. And someday, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 6 months from now, you're going to be able to tell that story of how you decided to stop being a victim and you got out of the situation, and now you're the millionaire you want to be, you're the entrepreneur you want to be, you're the flight attendant you want to be, whatever you want to do that somebody or something is keeping you from. So I hope you feel better after watching this video. Thank you for your comments, because it gives me a lot of inspiration for what I talk about in these videos. So feel free to leave your comments, and if you want to work with me one-on-one, my inbox is open for those requests on TikTok and Instagram at Statements by Alex, and I have a link in my description of this video. So thanks again. See you guys in the next one.